Hey kids, Granddad Messiah here. Just thought I'd pop in before the video starts and say sorry for the delay on this. I thought I'd have a few more things lined up for July, and clearly I didn't. Oh, and also, how dare you! We are based and red-pilled in this household, and you all voting for this generic white girl option on this poll is unacceptable! Shame! Shame on the lot of you! You've brought great dishonor to your ancestors! Aside from that, I hope you all enjoyed today's video and see it as a strong argument as to why my opinions are objectively correct and you all still have much to learn. Celine, my marble-sculpted ass. The moon is weird. While the sun and its representative gods and goddesses can oftentimes take credit for the light which nurtures crops, scares away evil demons, and allows for humanity to see 2 feet in front of themselves without the need for the double-edged sword which is fire.
Ow! Heat was hot!
Meanwhile, you have the moon. A big, imposing light source which obviously doesn't do the job anywhere near as well as the sun.
You've done a hell of a lousy job. You're late. You're fired. Get out of here.
And in some mythologies, like the Koreans, they say that the moon is kind of like a anti-sun, which actually makes the night cooler. Along those same lines of logic, I would argue that the moon is the single biggest missed opportunity for our ancestors to write about mythology. I mean, think about it. You got this big, ominous ball of something floating throughout the night sky, changing forms within the span of time which conveniently corresponds to a woman's ovulation cycle. Oh, yeah, and its occasional propensity to eat the fucking sun! Yes, I realize there are quite a few myths explaining the phenomenon of the eclipse, but none of them, minus maybe like 2 of them, correctly ascertain that it is because of the moon. New video on that, possibly later. Don't get me wrong, there are some really cool tales tied to the moon from some less mainstream mythologies. My personal favorite still being Ilargi Amandrea of Basque mythology. Shameless plug. That being said, a lot of these stories really don't work to personify the moon, and even the aforementioned Amandrea is more of a nightmare-fueled eldritch horror which taunts the peons down below by showing them that their ultimate fate is the realization that individuality is a lie, and the afterlife, while it does exist, is neither tangible nor perceptible to the human soul. You want to take the black pill orally or anally? The moon gods and goddesses that we do get range from absolutely useless to creepy, rapey yanderes who like to perpetually keep young men alive eternally so that they can keep them as sex slaves. No, that is neither hyperbole, nor did I have to do any of my patented exaggerations for comedic effect. Just a reminder, if you find amusement in that story, you think rape is funny. 2. The exception to this unwritten rule is today's topic. Khonsu, yes, I pronounce it like the Marvel comics, it's technically correct, just not as popular as Khonsu, is like Hades. He seems very unassuming and surface level at first, but if you dive a bit deeper into his lore, do a bit of reading in between the lines, and admittedly take a few leaps in logic, you end up with a monumentally more complex, interesting, and in the case of the latter, authoritative deity. But you may be asking yourself, what makes Khonsu, a deity who really only appears in 2 mainstream Egyptian legends, that much of an interesting character so as to end up on my top 5 favorite gods of all time? No, we're not ready for that yet. That's a surprise for later. For now, let's just start out with the standard fanfare of one of these mythological character studies and examine the etymology of the name Khonsu. Well, it all comes from the word Knes, meaning to cross or to travel. Pretty simple enough, although there is an older, generally less accepted theory that his name comes from Knesu, which roughly means placenta, immediately drawing on the god's reputation as a fertility figure, especially with regards to women, as it is said that whenever Khonsu appeared in the night sky as a crescent moon, women were their most fertile.
Is my pussy pop appealing?
Appearance-wise, you've got your pick between these two schmucks. Let's start with the hilarious one. So, believe it or not, this incarnation of Khonsu is believed to depict him as a young boy, giving him the sidelock hairstyle popular with Egyptian youths at the time, complete with the longest, most elaborately styled goatee this side of Sturgis. I was about to make a joke about how most of you can't even grow facial hair while this literal fucking child can sport the classiest trim a man can get. But I'm really one to talk. That green skin there doesn't mean that he's about to puke, by the way. It's actually a fertility symbol, as is the flail in his hand because, I don't know, spanking sometimes lead to conception. Green, or Waj, is a color typically associated with the god Osiris, another fertility figure, though later became associated with the underworld thanks to this very same god's association with the color. If you want to know how he came to be the god of the underworld in the first place, yeah, I make a lot of videos and have to do the typical YouTuber engagement baiting, otherwise the algorithm will bury me. By the way, be sure to leave a like and comment your full legal name, credit card information, and social security number if you made it this far into the video. I'm pretty sure it's illegal for me to say that. I might be going to jail. Fuck. Interestingly enough, both Osiris and the other goddess typically seen sporting green, that being Hathor, are both tied to the agricultural fertility, while blue, or Irtu, is a color more typically assigned to the fertility of pussy. Considering that most depictions of Khonsu tell of him aiding mothers and cattle in the process of squeezing out their little crotch goblins, and this video isn't about to be short of creative liberties anyway, let me play the blue-haired Twitter lesbian artist and fix this real quick. There we go. The falcon-headed design comes to us in the form of one of the few stories associated with Khonsu in the New Kingdom. So the story goes that Ramses II was so strong and powerful and handsome that all the monarchs of the surrounding lands were super eager to drop their faces into his lap and give him that Gok Gok 3000. Metaphorically, they mostly just gave him a bunch of treasure. I mean, they could have sucked his dick too, I don't know. However, the Prince of Bakhtan didn't swing that way, so he just married off his eldest daughter named Neferu to the pharaoh, who must have really liked her cause he made her his queen. A few years later, the word reaches Ramses that his sister-in-law, a young girl by the name of Bentresh, had been stricken by a mysterious illness. So he sent out the royal medicine man, whose name is, this. Yeah, okay, just try and act like you know how to pronounce this in the comments. Let's just call him Dave. Came back and said that Bentresh didn't need a doctor, she needed Ghostbusters, because her body had been inhabited by a demon. And also informed him that his mother sucked cocks in hell, but that's neither here nor there. So, wanting to rescue her sister from the clutches of this demon, Neferu immediately takes her case straight up to the top and prays at the temple of the moon god Khonsu, as it is thought that in addition to emptying out the contents of a woman's uterus, Khonsu's holy moonlight was also capable of expelling demons. Hearing out her request, Khonsu says he'll do it, but his Ka cannot leave the temple. So in order to channel some of his divine energy out to her sister in Bakhtan, he'd need a statue formed in the likeness of a falcon, and then he would imbue said statue with some of his purifying moonlight. Kinda like a godly battery. The pharaoh quickly ordered the construction of this statue, and once it had been personally blessed by Khonsu, it was sent off to Bakhtan, and Khonsu made quick work of said demon.
Suck my holy light, fuckers!
This all seemed to work out so well that the former prince, now king of Bakhtan, insisted on keeping the statue for years to come as a protective sigil for his kingdom. However, Khonsu felt the need to stress the importance of the word loan, and sent the king a nightmare of a ghostly falcon flying up into the air and returning back to the pharaoh. Huh. Supernatural dream of a king witnessing a falcon of light departing from his kingdom. Well, let's just hope that this one isn't as creepy around this daughter. Anyway, that's the story behind Khonsu's feather sona. I'd like you all to put a pin in that whole notion of moonlight being a deterrent for demons, as one of the gods we've previously accused of being somewhat competent is about to royally fuck it all up. For a little bit of added context, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, Khonsu wasn't always a benevolent moon god who put a stop to demon time so that women could menstruate in peace, or whatever the hell goes on down there. You see, way back in the Old Kingdom, roughly 4,350 years ago according to some estimates, these things called the pyramid texts were inscribed into the Pyramid of Unas, the 9th pharaoh of Egypt's 5th dynasty. However, it is generally agreed upon that the pyramid texts are even older than that, possibly dating all the way back to the 31st century BC. The primary concern of these writings deals with funerary rites and how the dead should be mummified and how the gods look after their departed souls. Well, interestingly enough, in the section primarily concerning Unas, Khonsu makes his first canonical appearance, as someone who captures and butchers other gods so that the departed pharaoh may eat their bodies and absorb their power for himself, a power he is heavily implied to have learned from Khonsu. Unas is a bull in heaven, victorious at will and living on the form of every god, eating parts of their body and coming, their bellies full of magic. The brow grasper, the one who is in the cauldron, is the one who lassos them for Unas, the one with raised head, who detains and restrains them, the one in charge of the blood, who holds them firm for him. Khonsu, the cutter of lords, who cuts their throats for Unas, takes out for him what is in their bodies. He is a messenger sent by Unas to inflict punishment. Later on in the Coffin text, a sort of rehashing of the aforementioned pyramid text, Khonsu is referred to as he who feasts on hearts, or Khonsu the Cannibal. So yeah, this guy clearly didn't get off to the most peaceable of starts, though like most religious figures, his depiction twisted and turned with the sands of time, eventually coming to represent a triad of central deities made up of his father, the former Ogdode Amun, click that link in the corner to find out more, and his mother, Mat, whose name literally just means mother. It's not exactly certain as to why Khonsu came to rise in popularity alongside these other two gods, but from this point forward, he was seen as a primarily benevolent god of fertility and gentle moonlight. Except, it's heavily implied that if you read between the lines a little bit, that Khonsu is less of a reformed man, and rather one whose behavior is kept in check by that purifying moonlight I mentioned earlier. Let me explain. So Khonsu, like most moon gods, was depicted in different ways depending on which phase of the moon was currently out in the night sky. It is said that when the moon was full, he resembled a neutered bull, whereas when the new moon appeared and it lost its light, Khonsu was described as a mighty bull in heaven, which sounds familiar. Oh shit, that's right. Okay, so hear me out, because I think I've got a pretty good theory going on here based on subtext. What if Khonsu is a god on probation? When Amun came to power as the central figure of the Egyptian pantheon, the gods granted Khonsu the purifying power of moonlight, which transformed him from an edgy, homicidal god butcher who even Kratos would probably describe as a bit much, to the iconic charmy green boy who benevolently shares his moonlight with all those who graciously ask for it to help combat the forces of darkness. But then, what happens when that light disappears? Well, it seems as though he goes back to his old ways, stalking the night as a cannibalistic predator, almost like a reverse werewolf. Well, that's all well and good, but then the obvious question arises. If the moonlight was meant to keep Khonsu in check, why didn't the gods just make it so that there was always enough moonlight to keep him submissive and breedable? And that's the neat thing. They did, until one of them decided to be a simp. This is the legend of how the moon lost its light. So way back in the glory days, Ra was sitting pretty as the uncontested king of the gods. This was before he got super old and people essentially mocked him for it. However, somebody seems to have lifted a page from the Greeks because there was a prophecy. It was said that if Ra were to newt in the goddess Nut, a terribly powerful child would be born to rise against his father and put an end to his reign. Oh yeah, that definitely doesn't sound familiar and almost cliche at all. So rather than wrap it up, or heaven forbid, practice abstinence with this one particular goddess when Ra essentially had his free reign over the entire frickin' pantheon, he decides to go full bullshit magic route and lays a curse on Nut, where she would not be able to bear any children on any day on the calendar. Oddly specific, but okay. Newt really wanted to have some children, however, and so she contracted out Thoth, the god of wisdom, and asked if there was any sort of loophole that she could exploit to get down with her bad self and start making some babies. It is said that Thoth was in love with Newt, and while there presently wasn't a way for her to cultivate children during the 360-day calendar, he had an idea of where he might get the light necessary to burn for an extra couple of days at the end of the year. And so, Thoth called our boy Khonsu to a game of sonnet, which is basically the ancient Egyptian version of chess, which happened to be Khonsu's favorite game. To spice things up, Thoth proposed a game of forfeits, but because Khonsu ain't gay like that, they decided not to play for articles of clothing, but rather moonlight. Now, Khonsu had a bit of a gambling problem, and against his better judgment, he decided to take Thoth's wager, and from there lost 5 games in a row, before calling it quits. What resulted from that was Thoth taking that lost moonlight and extending the calendar a whole 5 extra days, just so that Newt could cuck him and procreate with Geb instead, resulting in these chucklefucks and their autistic succession war. Please watch my other videos. However, without his complete power, Khonsu was forced to dimmer the brightness of the moon every month or so, and for a few days each month, its light was completely extinguished, and the mighty bull of Khonsu comes out once again. The moral of the story? Women don't ruin everything, but they make it really easy for beta males to do it for them.
Ma'am, please, a crumb of pussy!
And that is the story of Khonsu, probably the most complete variation of a moon god I've ever read about, and one who is indefinitely more interesting when you read in between the lines a bit. But what do you guys think? Am I onto something with my theory, or should Grandpa go back inside before he starts scaring the neighbors again, prattling on about dead pagan religions? Who or what should I cover next? Leave a suggestion in the comments below, and make sure to stay alive for the next 4 to 5 years to see that possibility come to fruition. Thanks to my Patreon names over here, and our channel members. Both are great ways to support whatever the hell I decide to do with my life to inevitably disappoint my parents, and also grants you early access to my videos as well as some bonus content for as little as $1 a month. But if you're a poor scrub like me, you can support the channel for free, unintentional rhyme with unintentional, by just liking the video, sharing it with your virgin friends, and subscribing if you haven't already. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, my name is Messiahs of Mythology, and as always, have a God's blessed day and a good yard.